connection is not the best in my mother's house, and so I decided to come outside where I knew I could hook up to Wi-Fi that was reliable. So hopefully I'm not going to be spotty. If I am spotty at any point, and I will reiterate this again during the interview, if I'm spotty at any point, please just hold on tight because I'm probably just going to come back. I might just be like a little fuzzy and then come back. So I'm so excited for tonight's interview, and that's why I'm going the extra mile to make sure everything's okay. We are speaking to Jamie of Coast to Coast Vintage. So Jamie has been in vintage resale for 6 years. I thought it was longer because I actually met Jamie about 9 years ago when I was a reseller, which is crazy. She was living in New York City, and now she lives in Los Angeles, where she's lived for 5 years with her partner. And Jamie has such a story. I hardly know her story. I really just know it through social media. So tonight we get to talk to her one-on-one, really about the nooks and crannies of her journey and the heart of her journey, which she is very transparent about on Instagram. But I know tonight's going to be really, really special because she's just going to really dive deep with us. And I really hope that you guys, if you're tuning in live or if you're watching the replay, that you just take some time to listen to this because I've seen, enough of Jamie that I know that she's going to have a lot to share about mindset and sticking to the resale game and sticking to your vision and what you think is true and best for you, which is why we do business. We do business because we want to do it the way that really speaks to who we are and why we're here to impact the planet. So I don't know if Jamie's on right now. I told her to leave a comment. Let me see. Thank you guys for tuning in. Okay, I'm not sure if I see her at the moment. I'll just wait for Jamie to leave a comment. This is her first time going live, so as you guys know, sometimes we have some hiccups, so hopefully everything's going to be fine, but I talked to the tech gods and the thrift gods, and I've been, here meditating, so I'm sure everything will be fine. Oh, there she is. There's Jamie. Yay. So I'm going to bring Jamie on. We have a ton of questions, guys. I sent her like a laundry list, which I have in front of me. How many questions do I have? I have like 14 questions. But if you guys have something specific, please comment. Comment at any time. I'll scroll back up at the end of the interview and we will address them. And just know that this is, a safe space to share maybe something that's happening or coming up for you about your journey. And I'm sure that Jamie will have some insights for you based on her experience. So Jamie, I'm going to basically request to add you, and you have to accept because you haven't requested to join. So I know this is your first time, so everyone bear with me as I can't add Jamie. Let me see here. No, that's invite to watch. Jamie, do you see where you can request to, hold on, wait. So Facebook is so interesting because sometimes I can add people based on the comments and sometimes I can't. Oh, she tried joining. Okay, so it didn't do anything because I didn't see anything. Shoot. Sorry, we're going to figure this out because I definitely have experienced this before. Let me see here. What's that? No, that's more ways to go live. Sorry, guys, if you're staring at my mouth. Okay, no, that's invite to watch. It didn't. Let me try again. Okay. Yeah, usually people can just request to join, but I can't actually add you at the moment. Shoot. I know, Dasha, I'm looking forward to it too. Jamie, if you want to pop in and pop out, that might do it. I don't understand Facebook. Jamie, you're using your phone, right? Just double checking because you can't request to join on like a laptop. Let me see here. And if you like reset your phone or anything before, just make sure that your your camera's on. Just send another request. Why don't I see it? Shoot. Maybe it's me. Oh no. Well, I can bring Betty on. Jamie, do you mind jumping off and jumping back in? Just to see if something changes. Maybe if I invite her to watch. Jamie, invite. Okay, so I invited. Thank you. So sorry. This is so strange. I don't know why it does that. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. Okay. Can't add person to Facebook Live. And we Google. So many things that sometimes you can't foresee. Just have the profile picture of the person you want to invite on the top right. Yeah, but I don't see her. Just restarted and sent again. Okay, then I'm going to have to try this again because I'm not getting your request. And I can't request to add you. Oh, wait, hold on, guys. There is a God. We're adding Jamie. We are adding Jamie. We are adding Jamie. We are adding Jamie. We are adding Jamie. We're connecting. We're connecting.
Yay!
We did it.
We did it. We did it.
So you know what I did?
Hi.
Is I pressed on your avatar.
Yes.
On Dolly. And then it said I could bring you on camera, which I've never seen before.
It was the magic of Dolly.
Okay, we're here. You look
We did
beautiful.
it. Thank
How
you,
are
everyone.
you?
Oh, thank you. So do you. I'm good. I just thank you, everyone who's watching this instead of the Emmys right now.
You know, I forgot it was the Emmys.
Me too.
This is so much more important.
It is. Sorry.
So much more important. And we can always like Google images what people wore.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I have been.
Oh my gosh, Jamie, thank you personally for taking the time to speak to our Thrift Boss babes.
My pleasure.
You are someone who is so admired in the vintage resale world. And so to have you say yes, I was excited. The Boss babes are excited. And we're just going to have a great chat. So, and you guys get so too. Such an exclusive kind of one-on-one with Jamie. So I'm really excited for you guys too. So I want to jump right into things because I know we're probably going to talk at length and I want you to share whatever's on your heart. But how did your love, this is the first question I always ask everyone, how did your love for vintage, secondhand, all of that world begin? Take us back.
I think it really started to be, I grew up with my mom being really into doing tag sales, first of all. So just things from our house, but I would help her set them up. And just, I think, seeing how she would price things and then just knowing people were getting deals. I've always been, like, my mom's been really into deals and things like that, and I think that I just kind of inherited that inherently. And I actually didn't know this, but my my mom's mom, my grandmother, she used to work in a vintage shop here in California. So my mom's from California. I was born and raised in Connecticut, but my mom's from out here, and so I think it's just been always kind of in me. And then once I was in high school and college, I started developing my style and thrifting, and I think it just kind of took off from there.
That's so awesome. It's funny because my mom just joined Facebook.
Oh.
And she commented in Thrift. Oh my God, I loved her.
Oh,
she said,
sweet.
I used to thrift in the 70s when you could thrift 30s and 40s dresses. It was
yeah,
like,
I believe it. Oh my gosh.
Why are you rubbing it in our faces? Like, that's who my mom is. She like, anyway, I love it. I love
Good for her. Why not? That's awesome.
Right. I know, right? It's like,
I wish.
You didn't keep them?
I wish.
So let's talk about Coast to Coast then. So you grew up in Connecticut, and
I did.
You moved out to LA 5 years ago, which we talked about over email. How did Coast to Coast begin? I know a little bit about your story. I don't want to divulge too much. If you want to take us like back to like the mustard seed all the way to today, like however much you want to share, because there's a reason you're called Coast to Coast Vintage for, for starters.
So indeed,
So spill the whole story to us and to me.
So basically, I went to school. This might be kind of jumping ahead to some things, but
No,
it all
please.
connects back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's circle back.
But I went to school at FIT for fashion design. I got my degree in that, and living in Connecticut, very close to New York City. You know, it's like an hour and a half train ride. So fortunate for that. Shockingly, I didn't go to New York City too much when I was younger, but I requested to go for my 13th birthday. We went to the Fashion Cafe at the time, which, if you know, you know. It was
I don't
amazing.
know.
It was like the Hard Rock Cafe, but it was owned specifically by the top like 90s supermodels at the time. So like I
What?
think Naomi Campbell, maybe Cindy Crawford, and it was like just like the Hard Rock Cafe, but it was the fashion cafe. So they had like instead of the framed, costume design things, it was
Yeah.
like framed runway looks. And so I went to New York City for it, Fashion Cafe, and then for the Hello Kitty store, obviously
Yes.
for my 13th birthday. And
Yeah.
I just knew I wanted to end up in New York City. And being so close and yet so far, and being from a very small town in Connecticut, and just always kind of, loving fashion and wanting to dress in something different. I went to high school in the early 2000s, so it was very Abercrombie and Fitch days, and,
Mm-hmm.
another, if you know, you know. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that for me, moving to New York and being there was such a dream for me. I was there for school, and then I lived there for almost 5 years working after school. And I loved it until the point where I was just like, okay, like, I think I've done everything I wanted to do here, and I want something a little bit more than what's being offered. Where, I mean, New York is the best place ever, but I was 28 at the time, or 27 when I thought of Coast to Coast, and 28 when I started it. And it was really just about um, seeing more. My mom is from California, like I mentioned earlier, and I had only been out there for like weddings for my family and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We're out here, not with friends or by myself, or really to explore anything outside of the kind of touristy things about LA. And so when I came out here with a friend when I was in my 20s, it was like, wait, what? Like, this
Yeah.
place is amazing. Like, there's so much to do. There's all these different climates and like places to go. And it was a whole new world for me, being, at a different age and everything. And so that's where I think it was more of anything like, okay, well, I want to move there. And at the time, I was probably jumping ahead again, but I was working retail. I've always worked retail.
Mm.
And I clearly could have, transferred, but instead I was just like, I want to do something else. And I had always wanted to start my own vintage shop. And so instead of just trying it online first, I just went all the way for it with Coast to Coast, which is kind of
Okay.
wild now looking back at it and being like, this is so, like, I feel like sometimes the inception of an idea, I was just so immersed in it and so excited about it that I never thought about any of the pitfalls or anything. It was just more like, yeah, okay, like I've got this. I can do this. I can,
Mm-hmm.
find a vintage camper and I can learn how to drive it, and I could drive it thousands of miles and like set up at different
We're so
events.
the
It's
same.
like
I
really
do stuff like that
wild.
too. Yeah, I'm like, oh, I
Right?
can
It's just
totally do
like,
that. No
yes, it's
problem.
like it's just, yes, it's one of those. It's like, okay, that's like a gift. I feel like, and I'm very much that
Mm.
person. I'm very goal oriented. So if I think of something that I'm like all in on, I am all in on it. You cannot convince me otherwise. Nothing's gonna scare me. And so my mom's actually the one where I was like, oh, I really want to have a vintage shop, and she had seen on some show. This was at the beginning of like the mobile craze beyond like food trucks,
Mhm.
and so this was beyond that. Where it was just starting with boutiques. And so there was like, the first one I think I may have heard of was the Lodecca, which is in Portland, Oregon. And I eventually like wildly got to set up in the same space as the Lodecca when we were moving out
So
here. And
cool.
that will be another story. But yeah, it was just, I don't know. As soon as I was like, oh, yes, like let's do something mobile. That sounds exciting and great. And initially I was gonna look for an Airstream and call it Home Sweet Home,
Mm.
totally different. And then I found the Saroscati, 1976 Saroscati on eBay that I ended up buying for about $1,500. And Coast to Coast was born. I don't know. It was just the look of it. It looked more California to me. If
Mm-hmm.
no one's seen it before, you can see it on my Instagram, but
Feel.
it's just like Yeah, it's a white and teal Sarascati. It's like 18 feet with the toe, so 15 feet long, really, without the toe. And it was just so
It's
cute.
huge.
And yeah, Coast to Coast was born. So it was a
So,
wild ride. Has been.
like literally a wild ride. So, just to back
Yes.
everyone, so
Yes. I know that was a
Jamie,
lot.
no, 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 it's okay. Because I think, like you said, if you know, you know. But some
Yes.
people don't know that you took this mobile camper all
Mm-hmm.
around the country to different, I'm
Mm-hmm.
assuming, shows, markets, just places where you could set up and sell. And
Mm-hmm.
this is how you supported yourself. So, how did
Mm-hmm.
you, and this is like not in my
Mm-hmm.
questions, like I said to you, I'm like, I always come up with questions in the moment. How did
Oh
you
yeah.
figure out like life management with just the driving, finding the events? I guess going back to LA, like how
Oh
did you?
Lord, I don't even. So I did research about it, but there was no one doing it. There was no one doing it that I could
Hmm.
look up and be like, oh, this is like the start of a blueprint for me. So I just kind of utilized resources. Like I said, I was just so blinded by the idea and just wanting it to succeed so much that I don't know. I just went for it and we planned out. So basically, we were living in New York City.
Hmm.
I was working as a merchandise manager in a store called Aritzia in Soho.
Yes, love
And
Aritzia.
I had
Yeah.
opened that store. So like I used to be at
Oh,
H&M as a visual merchandiser. I started out in Connecticut and I worked my way into the city. I traveled to Japan with H&M doing visual merchandising.
wow.
And then I was working in the Upper East Side H&M in New York and I
86th
was
Street.
feeling, you got it, yes
Okay.
indeed. And I was like feeling that pull to go to a different company. I've been with H&M at that point like almost 5 years. And I wanted to go to a different company, and Aritzia was just opening in Soho, and they're looking for a merchandise manager. And so I started there, and then by the time that I was really done with that, it was just like I had saved up the money to do it. And my boyfriend at the time, husband now, we were both kind of, he's very supportive and very, very, very fortunate, very supportive. And he was just kind of like, sure, you want to start this adventure? Okay, he believed in me and wanted to go for it. And so we lived in Harlem for the whole time we were in New York, and we moved out of our apartment. It was like very much our home. At the time, we had my cat Tigger, who was 17 years old, who had
Oh.
since I was 11, and we just like mapped out this plan. Like I started off, so like everything changed. Like I remember like when I got the trailer, even that was a big part of it. Is that I went to Massachusetts to see the trailer, knew it was the one immediately. It was the first one I even looked at, and I just knew it was the
Wow.
one. Got it. And then my friend Andrea, who is also my roommate and very good friend from FIT, she's like a modern day Renaissance woman. And I was like, I don't even know why I thought of her, but I was like, would you want to make this into a store for me? I'll pay you. Obviously, I've saved up money over time from like switching from H&M to Aritzia and getting paid a good deal more, luckily. And so I just like lived on my H&M life and but saved the
Ah.
excess money. So I had saved up some money and I was just like asked Andrea, and she was into it. She was living in Buffalo, New York at the time, so she was actually on the East Coast, which was great. And she literally stripped it down and built it back up again because she found like rust and different things. It was so wild. And but even when I went to go look at the trailer, I was like really had like that moment where I was like, "Oh, I'm going to have to." I like had wanted to get it on the road immediately. Like I was like ready to go in like 6 months, and I was just like, I'm gonna have to work at my job for another year to save money. Like this is not something I just want to like completely jump into.
Mm.
And it was heartbreaking for me because I was very stressed out at my job. It was just very long hours. I wasn't enjoying myself. I was getting gray hairs, which that's fine. But it was just like I was just ready to move on, and so to know in my head mentally that I was going to need to put in another year to save that money so I could do this right was like a big thing for me. I was just
Yeah.
like, all right, like I have to be a big girl about this and just suck it up. Like I'm very fortunate and privileged to be working in this job, to be making this money. And so I'm going to take advantage of it and I'm going to keep saving. And then when the time came, we were ready. I'll get into that more. We were ready, but better off when we moved here to LA, which was technically our second time coming across the country. But the first time we went out in 2013, we moved out of our apartment. Everything was so real. We moved in with my mom and my stepdad to continue working on the trailer because it was done,
Okay.
but I had to put in the fixtures and things. And plan everything. And even at that moment, I was like, oh man, like I want to just go out on the road, but like I should, why wouldn't I take advantage of having a New York City audience? Like what better audience in the entire world to have than this audience where I can build connections and network with people so I can come back, when that was the whole plan, was to be able to bounce back and forth once we got out to LA. So I had a connection with this girl I worked with at Aritzia. Her brother, I think it was her brother. No, it wasn't her brother, but it was a friend of her. She was working for the Hester Street Fair.
Yeah.
And so I was like, would you mind, kind of putting in a word for me? And so the very, very first event I did was without the trailer, actually, at Artists and Fleas in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg. And that was just inside to get like a feel for what it would be like. And I was like hooked immediately. And then the second one was the Hester Street Fair, and I went there on opening day for the fair, and it was the first time I had ever done anything with a trailer. I had to drive it from Connecticut down the FDR with all
It's
the bumps.
so stressful.
Oh
Yeah.
my, like I can't. It was, yeah, there's a
Girl,
lot of stories with the
I remember the
trailer.
first time,
There's a lot,
my
yes.
99 Camry, I was like, I'm gonna die.
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's serious. And imagine having,
Yeah.
so my mom actually got me lessons with this like a truck driver, like a
to
truck
learn.
driver class to learn. And so I did that, and it was like this guy, he was like an ex like police chief, and he had like this big hat, and he was drinking like a big gulp when we first walked in. It was wild. And at the end of it, he told me, he was like, if you want to be a commercial licensed driver, like I'll hire you. He was like, you're so good. So it was pretty awesome to learn that, and to feel that like empowerment of like, this is the thing I would have never in my life imagined I'd be doing, is like buying a car that can specifically tow this 3,000 ton, or 3,000 pounds trailer from the 70s that my friend worked on, and I trust her, but I don't know if it's gonna bust at the seams while we're like driving. Like I don't know what's gonna happen. So it was, and there was like all this stuff with the VIN by accident being sanded off, and so I had to go to the DMV. There was nothing easy. Nothing was easy.
And I think it's such a great way to end it, because we see people, we see where they're at, and we have no idea. I mean, it's so cliche. We have no idea.
No,
Like I said
no
at the top
idea.
of this interview, the nooks and the crannies on Instagram or wherever, on sites, people
Yeah.
spell out
So
some
easy
things,
to make
but
things look pretty.
the VIN and like the bumps and the FDR, like those are nooks and crannies where you're just
Oh
like,
yeah.
like your mind
That's
tells
wild.
you, why am I doing this?
Yes.
Like, why
Yeah.
am I doing it's so
Yeah.
hard, but you're like,
Oh yeah.
I
It's just like, I just
can't
kept,
stop.
yeah, I had that force to just like, I was like, no, this is going to happen because I said it was going to, and I risked so much, including, with my husband, with him like leaving his job to start something new eventually. Like at that point, Coast to Coast was supporting us. So already. And so it was pretty imperative that it work. But yeah, we went down the FDR, and I had everything. So dumb. Didn't even think about the fact that the camper didn't have like support, like shocks, like a car would. So it would take, like, the shocks in a car can take the bumps and make it so things don't fall apart. So I had everything all hung up in the shop, and I was like, I just get to go and open up the door. No. We pulled up, and everything, the racks were ripped off the walls.
Shit.
Yeah. So luckily, my good friend lives up in Harlem, and he came down at like 7 in the morning. So I was like, oh my gosh, like everything's on the floor, and I didn't have tools. I didn't have like a drill or anything.
Right. And this was the first time you ever set up.
This was the first time, and I opened the door, and like everybody, I didn't have curtains up yet, and so like the owners, or the people who did the market, came up to like be all excited, and they're looking at it, like there's just clothes everywhere, and I was like, oh, you'll have to, it's gonna look better, I swear, it'll look better.
And here you are. Okay. So
Yes.
this is amazing, because I feel like there's been a pivotal moment when you
Mm,
sort of paused coast to coast as a mobile shop,
mm-hmm,
which maybe you're still active in, I'm not quite sure. So I
mm-hmm.
want to hear that, and really
Yeah.
started generating sales online in some capacity. So how did that
Mm-hmm.
flow together in the last 6 years?
Well, I always had the online shop. I had an Etsy to start off with, and I always wanted to have an online presence. But for me, it was, and this is going to be, I know you had mentioned you're going to ask about advice, but I'll just say this right now.
Yeah.
Like, I 100% tell anybody. I remember this girl who, when I was setting up at an Urban Outfitter, she was a visual merchandiser there, and she kind of like sorted everything out for me. And she was like, I have this vintage that I want to sell vintage. And she's like, but I'm going to start online. And I was like, start in person. Like, whatever you
Really?
do, start in person. Do not start online. I think it's good to have a presence online, but
Mhm.
starting in person at anything, a pop-up, a farmer's market, a vintage flea market, whatever it is, that is how you gain better eyes. You get feedback
Mm,
immediately from customers. You get people who will see you, and if they like what you have, they're going to follow you online anyway. They're going to tell their friends about you. They're going to post about you. You can take photos of them, and then they'll repost that photo. So starting in person was really imperative for me, and I think it had a lot to do. I mean, especially knowing that I was going to be traveling with the trailer, there was there was no choice. But it really set a lot for me for everything. Like, yes, I had a background in retail, but
right.
just with customer service and the way I set everything up and what people were looking for, everything came from doing in-person events. So doing that stuff was just like took everything, I guess, to the next level for sure. And that's
I
what I
love
would,
that.
yeah, for
I
sure.
love that because I never would have. You're right. It does start in person.
Yeah.
Because the feedback is so much faster. And then
Yeah,
you
it's just better
can.
visibility, and you can like stand out from the way you set up your booth. You can, like I feel like online, like I've had it ever since the beginning. Like I was saying, I just realized I didn't answer your question yet, but I've
No,
had
it's
it
okay.
since the beginning,
I'll make
and
sure you do.
I started off with Etsy. Sorry, I was just so passionate. I want to tell everybody who ever sells vintage, like please just
It's
do
great.
in person
Listen to
somewhere, anywhere,
me. And we have a
anywhere.
lot of
Yes,
people.
please.
We have two people in Request Babes spending at Hester on a regular
Oh
basis.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So the just like the sweetest people, the best location. There's nothing
Great
quite
place.
like selling in New York City. I'm very spoiled by that, especially moving out to LA. It was like, sorry, I'm like very precariously set up on a tower of books here, and I feel like it's gonna fall any moment.
It's
I'll
okay.
just,
We'll roll with it. Like I said.
yeah. All of a sudden, it'll be my foot instead. But yes, I've always had Etsy for that visibility, so people could see what I had instead of just like, look at what this person's buying, and so people didn't feel left out, knowing that I wanted to make it an immersive experience of selling, mobile. And then when another story, but when we moved back to Connecticut briefly for a year before finally moving out to LA, which was the plan,
Yeah.
um, I started my own. I had Big Cartel at first, and so I used that platform, and I use Shopify, but I used Big Cartel first. And so selling online, even if I was doing events every weekend, which I was for the first 3 years, I did events every single weekend, sometimes Saturday and Sunday, but always at least one day,
Yeah.
was very important just for that, so people could see what I had to offer. I would obviously sell things through that. And people, given that I was traveling, that was important because if I made customers in Houston, Texas, for instance, but then now I'm back in New York, like they can still shop with me and we can keep in contact in that way.
Right. So you drove C to T C to C. Oh man, say
Yes,
that 10 times
yes.
fast. To Houston from Connecticut.
Yeah, yeah. So the first time we went out was in 2013. We started off in Connecticut and we did the route down the coast, over Florida. Sorry, Florida. I've never been to Florida. I mean, I have in my life, but
I'm
not
in
with coast to
Florida.
coast.
You're in
Oh, are
Florida
you?
now.
Oh
I'm in
my God!
Florida right
There you
now.
go.
In
Coast to coast
Florida.
is in Florida. Check. But we went down the East Coast
Hmm.
and then south, and the only event that I had planned, which is wild because it was supposed to be, so we were supposed to be moving out to LA. We had no home planned. We had no events other than doing, they had the Renegade Craft Fair, most a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people. That's very popular. They had one in Austin that was in May, which is when we went on the road, and they had like a vintage sector section. They had like a
Sector. Yeah.
vintage, yeah, part of it. So we were invited to do that and to be a part of that. So that was the main one. But otherwise, I was traveling down. I made a friend. There was this girl selling in Wilmington, Carolina, who has a vintage shop there that's like the vintage store. And it is, Wilmington is like the second Hollywood of the South next to Atlanta. But that's
Really?
like, for anyone, that's where Dawson's Creek was filmed. That's where One Tree Hill was filmed. So it is, there's people coming in and out of there, and it's like a destination. And so we set up there. Like, she helped me to get a spot outside of like a co-op in Wilmington, North Carolina, for like 2 to 4 hours. I had to get a 1 day seller's permit that I had to
Mm-hmm.
mail in a check for to someone just so that way I could sell there for that day. And I was already like, whatever accountant I get is gonna hate me because like, what is even just
Yeah.
like 1 day selling? But from there, like, we just went and popped up in random places. I think it was so disorganized. It was so disorganized. I had no idea
Okay.
what I was doing. No
But
idea.
it
When we got
worked.
to it, well, yes and no. When
Yeah.
we got to Austin, mind you, I had been doing my markets already in New York City, and I had two under my belt, and I was like, oh wow, okay, I can make this happen. This money is pretty good. And so I was like, as long as this keeps happening, like, I'll be fine. And so we did Austin, and it was terrible. I
Hmm.
could not even stress how terrible that event was. It basically, I made back the money it cost me to do it, and that was like on top of traveling fees, on top of gas, hotel. We had a cat with us. We were traveling with my cat. There was just so many things, and so really, I was relying a lot on the kindness of strangers, but through Instagram. So people that were already following us through Instagram and knowing about our journey. From Austin, we went backwards to Houston because they were having something going on like that weekend. And I was like, well, I need to do better with money because this is not good. Like, this is not what I was expecting. That was my first taste of just like, okay, things are not always going to go this great. Like, I'm not just going to sell this stuff because it's
Mm-hmm.
not like that event was inside. It was like in a convention hall. So I was like, we had to drive the trailer inside this building. That's not the first or last time. It was like a wild place I had to drive it. But we had to park in there. It was just awful. It was awful. There was no organic foot traffic. It
Huh.
was bad. And so I had to then make it work from there. And then we spent like a month in Texas. We set up also in Marfa, Texas,
Mm-hmm.
which is
The Prada
very
stores.
random. But
Yeah.
yep, that was at the time 2013. That was, that was a big thing. And so I was like, ooh, I want to set up in Marfa. And so we went to Marfa. And then we went through New Mexico, hit like a windstorm there that was pretty wild. So be driving a trailer with that. And when before LA and before anything else, we were going to Denver, which was where my friend Andrea, who had done the trailer, had moved. So
Okay.
she had moved to
From
Denver, so we
Buffalo.
wanted to go there, yes, to do pop ups. So we had pop ups set up there. And then unexpectedly, we ended up being in Denver for a month. So it was just like a wild ride, very literally, like you said. It was very interesting. And then from Denver, we unfortunately had to go back home. That's why I say like the first time out was questionable because our cat was sick when we went out and we knew it. He had some kidney problems. And we ended up having to put him down in Denver. So it was just like a very like emotional. I was doing pop-ups every weekend there. My friend, when we realized we were going to have to stay longer just to stay put for my cat, she had a friend who was going to Africa for a bit, and so her place was going to be vacant, and she let us just stay there, and we paid her rent while she was gone, but it was like very affordable, and we didn't do any paid events while we were there. Like, everything was just like, I would contact a bar for happy hour, I would contact a restaurant for brunch, and these people just so kindly would let us park outside for like a couple of hours, and that's how I made our living because Adam
Wow.
wasn't working either. So it was just coast to coast. Yeah, it
So
was
what you're
nuts.
saying basically
Mm-hmm.
is that your back was against the wall and you had to make it happen. And I think so
Yeah.
many people in any
Mm-hmm.
industry, but let's just talk about resale.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's like 2 points I want to make.
Mm-hmm.
They have a really good run and then things start to turn to shit and they're like, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
can't do this. It's
Yeah.
whatever. But like you said, you know, even the best of the best have those experiences
Oh
because
yeah.
it just comes down to circumstances out of your control, types of
Oh yeah.
customers,
And
um,
poor planning. I
poor
can own up to that.
planning. Okay,
Yeah.
poor planning.
Yeah.
And then, you
Yeah.
know, two, it's like resale is selling. And
Mm-hmm.
I think so many people forget that and they're like, oh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to sit here and people are going to come. I mean, I'm talking about in person, but even online to a
Oh
certain
yeah.
extent, people are like, oh,
100%.
it's just going to sell. It's like you said, it's customer service. It's making a phone call to a bar. It's being your best self because
Mm-hmm.
you need to be your best self for that energy to be, you know, out in the universe for the right people to find you. It's so much more
Mm-hmm.
than just sitting back and like, yeah, it's going to happen.
Oh yeah.
So like I appreciate you sharing that. So I'm
Oh, of course.
curious. You obviously started your website, Coast to Coast Vintage.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to share with the Thrift Boss Babes tonight is a little bit more about where you're at now, which is
Mm-hmm.
you're using Instagram very wisely. Now you have a large Instagram following, which obviously you've cultivated over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that
Yeah, it's
takes
very
time.
fortunate. Yes,
Very
yeah,
fortunate.
doing events. That's I like I said when I moved when I was in New York, I was doing Saturday and Sunday. I was
Yeah,
either at the Artists and Fleas or I was at the Brooklyn Flea in Williamsburg or in Park
right,
Slope.
right.
And I was fortunate enough. I was the first ever mobile shop to be invited to do the Williamsburg Brooklyn Flea, which was a big deal. And this was after we went back home and was like, okay, I have to regroup. I need to figure things out so we can make the move out to LA and do it right this time. So to have like a do over essentially.
Got it.
And so it was all doing events. And then even when we moved out here, we moved
Wow.
here on Halloween on a Friday. So
Yeah.
it's 5 years this Halloween. And on Sunday, I was doing the Melrose Trading Post. And then it just never
Yeah,
stopped.
and I think that's, you know, I was thinking about it because we met at Artists and Fleas, but I think I met you in LA.
Oh, really?
Again, I think I
Maybe?
met you at Melrose. And I
Oh,
can't,
yeah, you're right. Because I recognized you from, because you had short hair when I met you, right? Didn't you
oh,
used
yeah.
to have short hair? Yeah.
Well, like 10 years ago, it was dark
Yeah.
and short.
Yeah.
And then in
Yeah.
LA, it was blonde but short. And I
Yeah.
was with my friend,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I was selling, I did
Kendra.
every single market
Yeah,
out here that you could do.
it's amazing. So tell us a little bit, because I think that it sounds easier than it is, right? How do you
Mm.
in the moment or just as someone who loves her resale shop, loves what she does, is great at customer service, attract people to follow you on Instagram? How does that connection happen between in
I
person
think,
to digital?
well, I think it had a lot to do with I would post customer photos a lot. So
Okay.
if there was someone who I really just connected with, who I felt like, because I've always had a thing where it's like I could have a great day financially, but not feel satisfied in the way that I connected with people. Like it would be like, oh
Yeah.
wow, like I made this money, but like everyone was just in and out. I didn't really talk to anybody or have a conversation. And that was always my thing when I did events was to be like, how's your day going? Like just talk to people,
Yeah.
find out what they're doing, where they're from, especially in the cities I was in. It's more often than not that people were traveling from somewhere else. They were visiting from somewhere else. And so for me, it was really important to make that connection with the customer and to get to know them. And then I felt like that kind of ended up organically helping me as well with like the sale. Like if somebody
Yeah.
really likes something, sharing our story, because in the beginning when we were traveling, I on my tags, my price tags, there was a map of the U.S. and I would put a
Yes.
heart of the state from wherever I found the item, and so that would really engage people. And
Love it.
so I think it was just that it was our story. You know, we were living something that I look back on now and I'm like that was a very for myself being like a white woman traveling across America and this inviting people into a trailer and setting up in different towns is a very privileged thing for me to be doing and to be allowed to do that. I also would set up in Brooklyn on the streets on like a Friday, like a park near McCarran Park, and no one would ever come and be like, "What are you doing here?" Like I would
Really?
literally be able to make
Wow.
money just selling, and there would be police that would walk by. So it was a very privileged thing, but I think that people really were enticed by that lifestyle of like us traveling around with our cat, myself, my husband, having that freedom, I guess, and people wanting to really support us. Like sometimes people would just be like, I just want to buy something just to like support you because I just love what you're doing, and it made me fulfilled, kind of like a fantasy for other people. Um, and obviously with that, like that was me at one point too, right? Where I was just like, that sounds like amazing, and reality of it is different. I mean, it's still great, but it's different. And so I think that connection with customers and them wanting to support, and um, just taking pictures of people and reposting them, and then them being really into that. And I think it just all kind of came together because all of my followers, I've had people ask me before if I bought any of my followers. And I was like a little bit offended, only because I work so hard to gain them
Yeah.
organically, especially in the beginning. Especially in the beginning, because I would do an event and I would get like 100 new followers just from doing an event, because it would be people telling their friends, and just connecting with me as a person, and then also with the brand. So it was really special.
This is it's what I'm taking away from what you're sharing is something that I think is really insightful, and it's to be honest and authentic about your
Mm-hmm.
story. And people
Mm-hmm.
want to support authenticity. And while your story might not
Mm-hmm.
be the same as Jamie's, I know a couple of your stories. I know your hopes, your goals, I know your frustrations. And if you can somehow, through marketing, that's not like abrasive in your face, but just be like, hey, this is my why.
Mm-hmm.
And this is who I am and what I stand for, then the right people are going to show up and want to be a piece of that, especially if you can be a reflection for them, which is what Jamie was saying, how people
Mm-hmm.
are like, wow, that's something I would have loved to have done. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
not, but I know that this is hard. Intuitively, your customers knew like that can't be easy. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you were
It
saying?
was. Oh no, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah,
I was just saying, yeah.
yeah. And I was just gonna say, Jamie has almost 20,000 followers, which is a significant amount for a vintage-based reseller. And
Mm-hmm.
so when it comes to your use of Instagram, right? I know um, there's a lot we can talk about with with Instagram, with the platform. First and foremost, it's a free tool, so we always have to remember that. It's what I always tell people is that it's still a free tool. It's still giving us
Mm-hmm.
access to people that we normally wouldn't have access to. But when
Indeed.
Yes. But when did you transition, Jamie, to being more intentional with Instagram to form an Insta shop? Now, I know you don't say, okay, here's everything, DM me on Instagram. You still send people to
Mm-hmm.
your website, but in a
Yes, that's
sense, you
always been my
do.
intention.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was something I did on purpose, because I didn't, the Instas,
Right.
the yeah,
So people
that's
can
just
can
always
go
what I
back to
liked.
it on their own, essentially, because then they get that impression, right?
Yeah, I think it's just I'm paying for the website, so it's
Oh,
nice when
yeah.
people, go to it. And I that was always my intention, because I've had a lot of people, I've been very vocal about my frustrations with selling online since I transitioned into selling online only.
Hmm. Hmm.
Just the changes, the ebbs and flows of retail definitely extend to the vintage world. Whether it be you have an Etsy or a Shopify or a Depop or uh,
Yeah.
anything. And
Poshmark.
so
Yep.
people have Poshmark, yet people have suggested to me before to be like, oh, you should try. Have you tried Depop? Have you tried this and that? And I never wanted to flood the market in the sense where I guess it's like
Hmm.
everyone's different. Everyone is totally different. I think whatever works best for you, just stick to that. But I always wanted to have like a very defined, like, this is my website, and then this is my Etsy. And to have people be able to go there, and to focus on Instagram as a marketing tool, but not necessarily like a shop.
Yeah. Got it. Got it. And so, how have you, just to explain to our audience, and I was just looking down in our questions to see if there was anything I missed that was specific, but in
Oh, sure.
general, how do you use Instagram then, as a tool to drive people to your website? What's your method and strategy?
Um, my method is generally, I don't. I guess I don't know that I really have one. I feel like it's always been very organic for me.
Mm-hmm.
Not like specifically for me, just the way I go about it is more organic. Where I did set up a while ago, ever since I started selling only online, people know when that if I am going to be listing something, it's always at 7 p.m. PST. That was just a time
Okay.
that worked out best for me. I don't remember how I figured it out. And
Is it on a
then
particular day or just whatever
it
work?
used to be, but now I'm working in a part-time job right
Right.
now, and so it used to be at least Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then maybe Friday. So it really would depend on how much product I had or the time of year or my schedule, even just personally. But I've always used it as a tool to drive people to the site using either product shots that I take in my, I'm pointing as if you know what I'm pointing at,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
my side yard. There's like a fence that was I painted white when we moved into this place, and that's what I use to take my photos against. It's just a good, I'm in a good rhythm now with just my tripod and myself, and it's
Yeah, yeah,
quiet
yeah.
and it's good. And then, but the most important thing that I've really implemented is doing what I like to call in the wild shots. So it's just my husband and I just going out around our neighborhood, or we'll like go out for somewhere, and I'll be like, oh, I really want to showcase this piece for tonight. Like, I think this is going to be a great one that's going to sell quickly, and people respond more to me wearing things out, just like for Instagram, out, in front of a fun wall or in front of some plants or whatever it may be. People really respond to that more, and I feel like it kind of helps the algorithm more as well, because that has been not as kind to me over the past year or so.
Mhm.
And so that, if anything, I think that's just what I like to use it for the business is showing how things look on me, how they move, sharing anything from the past. I've built up 6 years of experience, and I have 6 years worth of stories, doing throwbacks to different things, or reposting a customer. I think Instagram, I've used it since day one. That was always going to be the number one thing that I was going to use for
Nice,
coast to coast,
nice.
being that we were on the road as well, and that was just the easiest way for people to access and see.
Right, right. So
Mm-hmm.
I love this point about being out in the wild, which I love using the word
Yes.
wild because I'm always like the thrift
Yeah.
wild, like the wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
In the wild.
and it does take extra energy, right? It does kind of be
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I'm going to wear this outfit, or let me go take
Mm-hmm.
3 out in the wild shots by
Mm-hmm.
myself with my tripod because I don't have a
Mm-hmm.
boyfriend or a friend even to take
Yeah.
photos of me.
Whatever gets it done.
Whatever gets it done. And I love that you just shared that you use a tripod to take photos of yourself. Are you
Mm-hmm.
using a DSLR or are you using an iPhone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you have a
that's
timer.
so with vintage. Yes, I use a Canon DSLR. I have photography has always been a great love of mine since I was in high school. My grandfather gave me my first Canon DSLR, and
Mm,
I've always loved, loved, loved photography. So that's why for vintage to kind of meet at the intersection of all my passions and loves was just such like a I don't know. It was just meant to be. It
that's so
was meant to
cool.
be for sure.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. Now, what are your like customer service best practices when it comes to your site, when it comes to Instagram? I'm sure you get tons of DMs. Sometimes you can't reply to all of them. What works for you?
Yeah. What works best for me is definitely treating my returning customers with a lot of care.
Mm,
I actually this year? Yeah, I think this year I was like, okay, Instagram, like you give me all these free tools and everything, and I have a business account, and you're offering this like close friends thing, and I'm like, I mean, yes, I follow some of my friends on my business account, but I can't, like, how can I use this to monetize something? So I actually utilized it to add returning customers.
ah,
So that way I had people DM me, and I was like, if you've had, like, I made it so it was, I think, you had to have placed a minimum of 2 orders with me, and the most recent one had to be within the past year. And if you fit that bill, I would add you to this list. And then through that list, I would post the I call my items fresh pics. That's another thing that is I always like to say for advice is finding creative ways to utilize, because so many people refer to vintage as just like secondhand or old or used clothing. And I think if you can find a way to market it as something that sounds appealing and
Right.
then stay consistent with that, like my new arrivals every week are fresh picks. So it's like fresh picks, or these are the fresh picks that are rising. And then I feel like to people, to customers, it's like, ooh, like it's like just the thought of like something fresh is like not something that's like old and musty and whatever some people think of vintage. So I think that was like a really good tool for me to start with. And then so I would do within these close friends, which is just my loyal customers, I
Mm-hmm.
would show them ahead of time what I'd be posting, and only they could see it. And that would give them, I set up a page in my Shopify that they could only access, and then I would post it early so they could have first dibs essentially
That is
on
huge
the
advice. That is so
yeah,
cool.
so it worked out super well, and people just really responded to it. I feel like as a customer service point, it really, like, putting in effort, but it's not like per person, it's just like to a group of people. And so, yes, I'm putting in that effort, but I think it's important to show those people who have showed up for me and have supported me financially, that this is something I care about you. I see you. I want you to have these things that are the first, because you're someone who has come back. And for a repeat customer for vintage, that's, you're very fortunate if you have even, a handful of people, because vintage is everywhere.
You're
So I think
so
it's just
right.
important.
And
Yeah.
what you're speaking to is, this art form of working smarter and not
Mm-hmm.
harder, and recognizing that to achieve a new customer, it's more elbow grease than to
Yeah.
potentially get, it sounds kind of
Yeah.
harsh,
To
but
retain.
get a deal,
Yeah.
right? Or get
Yes. Yeah.
a buy or purchase
Yes.
from a returning customer. So you use the
Mm-hmm.
close friends list in the stories.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're
Yep.
saying? Got it. Okay.
Exactly. Yes,
I
it's close
accidentally
friends in
sent something
stories.
to close
Oh,
friends
it's,
today. I was
oh,
like,
did you?
oops. Yeah. Because I don't even know who's on my
Yeah.
close friends list. I need to could be like some guys I'm flirting with. I don't know. I don't
Yeah, you
know.
never know. Could be a good
But
thing.
you can
Hopefully.
edit that list. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, you can edit that list. So I just would have people, like, I did it in my DMs, and I was just like, if you're interested in this and if you fit this criteria, DM me your full name. So that way I was able to, a lot of my customers I already know. I know who they are. I already added those people. And then there are some people where I was just like, I need your full name so I can, look at their orders and make sure that it fit within that criteria. Because it's like, yeah, that'd be, to have someone who maybe supported me like 5 years ago, and then they're trying to get for, it's like, that's not, there's nothing wrong with that. But the people who
Right.
have been actively supporting me, and not just like, they did like one order and then a sale order. That was another thing, is I was like, they have to be full price orders, because,
Okay.
like, no shame to anyone who wants to shop a sale, but if I have someone who's spending X amount of money with me, and then someone who's like spending like sale amount of money with me, it's not that they shouldn't be treated the same or that they wouldn't be as loyal, but I think it's just, I don't know, just being choosy with who
I
you're
agree.
offering that to. That was just for
It
my
increases your
practice. And
value.
yeah,
It increases your value
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah. Now, you might not have an answer for this, but is there something you've tried on Instagram that just didn't work or didn't give you the results you were expecting?
I tried on Instagram. Yeah, I saw this question. To be honest, I couldn't think of anything. Um, mm, 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 mm. No, I couldn't think of anything
Okay.
specific, because I feel like it's always good to try things for sure. But nothing that was like, oh, I really messed that one up. Yeah, I think everything that I've done, like, even if it hasn't worked initially, I've just kept at it and it's worked. Um, just to stick to similar formulas, I think. Like, I knew I didn't want to sell directly through Instagram, which I have in my stories sometimes for like home goods and things like that, or things that maybe don't fit me.
Mm.
I've done that before. But surprisingly, no, nothing that I can think of that stands out.
Okay, so speaking of fit, you have another model who looks remarkably similar to you. How did you meet her? Why do you use her? I mean,
Oh
I'm
gosh.
pretty much spilling the beans. It's because not everything fits you, so you can't model everything. I'm assuming
Oh
you
yeah.
pin things sometimes. I'm assuming.
Yeah, or
Yeah, tell
belt
us
it,
the
yeah.
story. Or belt it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yes. So I was at the point where I was finding I had like a decent amount of pieces that were smaller. I that did not fit me, and I wanted to showcase them as like either just smaller in measurement or petite,
Right.
and like jumpsuits and stuff like that. And so I just was like, okay, like I've never done this before. It's kind of weird because my whole brand is built around me. Um, but I am gonna put, it out there on Instagram that I'm looking for a model with these measurements, and I'll just see what people have to say. And so I got some responses, and there was this one response from this girl who was like, "These are my measurements. It would work, and I would love to work with you." And it turns out that I had taken a photo of her outside the trailer 5 years ago at an Artists and Fleas event in downtown. She was 14 years old at the time.
No.
Yes, she was 14. She was with her friend. I remember
Energy.
them both. Her friend would come back to that event with her dad, and they were both dressed like so cute. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, like they were so sweet, just like the sweetest little like LA girls, just like don't even know how cool they are. And I took a photo of them outside, and I always remember them. And I realized when she messaged me and I looked at her Instagram that this was the same girl. And she was now a senior in high school. Not only that, but she did in fact look kind of similar to me. She has short curly hair. If you go to my Instagram, you can see her. She's now in college in Pennsylvania, so I don't
Cool.
have her now. But she has short curly hair, and she lived like 15 minutes from where I live. She was also a volunteer at Bob Baker Marionettes Theater, which is an organization and a theater that I support greatly. It was wild. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, sure, why not? Come over. And, it was a big deal for me to look for help and to also
Yeah.
allow someone into my home. And it was just immediate. It was immediate. I saw her. We are now just like very good friends. She's like literally half my age.
I love it.
Literally like one half of my age. But she's an old soul and just such a special, special person. I couldn't love her more. I wouldn't have wanted anyone else. And it just worked out so well. We would have such a good time together. And she was just darling. Like before she left, there was one day where I had a swarm of bees in the backyard that came out of nowhere. And I was like, oh no, her name's Roxy. I was like, Roxy, like, you can't come over today. And she was going to be going away to Europe for a couple weeks. And she was like, just come to my house. You can take them here. So she was just so sweet and just beyond her years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you
Yeah.
don't use Roxy or any other models currently, just yourself.
No.
Okay.
I feel like initially I wasn't like looking for a Roxy, but now that I've had a Roxy, I'm like, oh no, I don't know anybody who could replace her. So I'm not looking for anyone currently, and I just use myself.
She'll find you. She'll find you.
Yeah, I hope so.
I love it. I love it. Now, I had two more questions for you, and then we have a few questions in the comments. 'Cause
Oh, sure.
if you can believe it, it's almost been an hour. That's how time flies
Wow.
with these.
Oh my gosh,
like,
yes.
flies.
Thank
Like,
you to everyone
oh
who
my
has
gosh.
stuck with it. I appreciate you.
But this is such an important question, and it's funny, like not funny, but like you said, it's like a coincidence, but not, because when I worded this question to you, I said your brand is vintage, but it's so fresh. Not thinking that you use the word fresh picks.
The
So
fresh picks.
subconsciously,
Mm-hmm.
fresh was in my brain.
It
So
works.
yes, your picks are fresh. Your brand is fresh. From your personal
Thank you.
opinion, why do you think having a brand such as yours, which is, I'd say, targeted, why is that so important for success?
I think it's important for success, and I always say it because it's just like, finding a vintage store in person, online, at flea. The vintage is everywhere. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Everyone's dream is to sell vintage. Not literally everyone, but if you're into fashion, and I feel like it's just like there's not anybody I know of who's like a person who's into fashion and creative and lives in a city who's like not like, I want to sell vintage. And so I think for me, I always knew from the beginning, even with creating, coast to coast, and all the little details that I put into it to make it stand out, was really, it was all just a big marketing ploy to just make sure people remembered me, and that it wasn't I got this at a thrift store, I got this at a flea market. It was I got it from Coast to Coast Vintage, and that was
Yeah.
very important to me from the beginning. And that was something that I feel like I achieved, and that I was very very proud of. I think a lot of it had to do with the traveling. There's a lot of like things that met where it was like because I was traveling, because I would share, like, I didn't expect it to be such a big hit to share where I found something, but people would just like lose their minds off over that. I think, when you meet me in person, I am who I present. I am exactly who I have been for my whole life, and I think all of that, plus with social media, really just made it into a brand, as opposed to, like, I was always like, oh, Coast to Coast Vintage is a lifestyle brand. Like, when I started, I was like, it's vintage, but it's a lifestyle brand, because when I go into cities, I'm not just going to show up and sell and leave. I'm going to show up and I'm going to tell you where I like to eat, where I like to shop, where we stayed, the different, it's how I've been for my whole life. My husband and I met when we were freshmen in college, so we've been together for 16 years, and we used to take trips to just go to, different areas in the Northeast, and just find like quirky different places, and I always love to share that with people. So it's always been who I am, and I think bringing that into the brand was
Yeah.
a big part of the success, because it would be like I have different hashtags where it's like C2C explores, C2C on the road, and people could see, and I would geotag. I was never like, I don't want you knowing where I am. Like, I wanted to be an open book and to put it all out there and to share places. 'Cause that's what in the beginning, and it still is, but Instagram was very different beast in the beginning.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say beast. It's a beast now. It was a different
It was
vehicle. Like, it was like,
pony. It was a pony.
yeah,
A white
yeah. Just like a
horse.
little cute, like little Sebastian from Parks and Rec. Just like, oh, this is so
Right.
nice. Like,
Right.
yeah, it was just very lovely, and it felt like a
I
community, which
remember. Yeah.
using that word, whatever, but it felt like that, and so that's how I discovered so many of the places I wanted to stop on our travels, and so it was important to me to share that, and so I think I just started off knowing that I wanted to stand out in
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah. And like, again, like, I really like to break down what the people I'm speaking to say, but what you're essentially saying is you personalize your brand, not so much
Mm-hmm.
where you're like, this is every waking moment of my day, or all my,
Yeah.
my struggles, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, goodbye light. Well,
Oh.
I guess the
Oh,
interview's
no.
over. It's fine.
Should I turn off mine too? Solidarity.
This is actually like the second time this has happened on an interview, because I'm so ridiculous with
Oh,
my Wi-Fi.
no.
I'm
Yeah.
like literally outside right now. I don't know how to turn the light back
I
on.
can see you. I can see you. You're good.
But basically, guys, what Jamie did was she picked a few things. So think to yourself, what are a few things that represent me that I can share beyond vintage? Or how can I brand myself where it's memorable? So Jamie was talking about just literally on her tags, which that was a lot of extra effort. She put a heart where she sourced the garment. I mean, that is so cool. It takes a lot of
Oh,
effort.
thank you.
But that's
Yeah.
probably a huge reason why people would either want to buy it or remember you. They'd be like, "Oh, that's my home state," or "Oh, it's from Oklahoma." That's amazing. That's
Oh, yeah.
for me. I'd be like, "No way, this is from Hawaii." What? Like, you went to Hawaii with a trailer? Like, not that happened. But, it basically, what I'm saying is it's so much more than vintage, and that's why Jamie's brand has stood the test of time. If you think about it, 6 years is a long time. For a brand to last, for any business to last, no matter the income, but to continue to move forward. And that's why when we talk about vintage resellers, people talk about Coast to Coast. I mean, it's true, Jamie. Like, people are like, "Oh my God, Coast to Coast."
Oh my gosh.
So you are someone,
That's so nice.
who has left an impression because of your branding and your marketing and the feel good vibes that your Instagram and your website and your personality present. So the last question I want to ask you before we dive into a few questions, there's only a few, and you sort of spoke about this, which I really appreciate. You said, advice I give people. But is there anything else that you would tell someone, whether they're a beginner or an intermediate reseller, whether it's vintage or secondhand, so that they don't have to make the same mistakes or have the same struggles that you might have had?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it sounds kind of cliche, but if you really love something, you keep at it. Um, Save for, your own well-being mentally. That's something that I've focused a lot in the last like couple of years. I think it's really important to love something and to put the effort into it, but not to sacrifice yourself
Right.
to the extent that your own mental well-being might be affected by it. Because I know for me, I find it very difficult working for myself to separate my self-worth from how much money I'm making.
Mm,
And that's a
yeah.
lesson that I'm still learning, because it's like, okay, just because it's a bad week or month or year or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm doing poorly. I think just staying true to who you are. I've always bought for myself also. Not literally, but if something really, that feeling where it's like, you see like a really great vintage piece and it's like you get like a rush to your brain of like
Yeah.
dopamine, and you're just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Like, that's the pieces I try to stick with buying, because then I feel like that energy is gonna transmit into the photos I take of it, into the marketing effort I put into it. I'm not going to sell something I don't believe in. And I do think that selling online has helped me with that a bit, because I did used to have a lot of
Mm,
filler to an extent
filler.
because of doing
Yeah.
events every weekend, and now it's more curated online because I don't have
Right.
that pressure. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I think just staying true to yourself, so corny, but it's just so true. Just like, if you love something, you're gonna find someone else who's gonna love it, and you're gonna find another person. And if you really curate something, I think with vintage, there are so many different styles to choose from, but if you're able to curate a style that is you and that people can identify. Like, I have people sending me things being like, this is so coast to coast, and it's just a vintage piece. I didn't design it. Like, I didn't do anything,
Put it
but
in
because
coast to
it's
coast.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, but because of the fact that it's like I do a lot of prints and bright colors and certain silhouettes, it's very
Right.
flattering. And I think that it really says something for being able to stand out like that. So just stay true to yourself. Don't get too hard on yourself if you're not having a good go of it. It's so hard. It's so hard. If even still 6 years in, if I have a good week, like, it's like I still get super excited, and but I still have that voice in the back of my head where it's like, well, what about next week? And it's just so important to celebrate your successes, and to
Yeah.
celebrate how far you've come with it, or if you've connected with like one person who's like, leaving you a review or posting a photo. Just enjoy it. Just
Right.
enjoy it. Don't second guess yourself.
Right. I think selling secondhand, there's so many metaphors we can pull out of the the journey, right? The highs and the
Mm-hmm.
lows that correlate to
Mm-hmm.
life itself. And I think it's actually
Mm-hmm.
a spiritual journey. This is me getting really deep. Um,
Go
through
for
that,
it.
yeah, through that experience of resale. And so, like, the more that you just, like you said, express gratitude, count your
Mm-hmm.
blessings, connect with people, have
Mm-hmm.
human connection, which is our most valuable asset here this lifetime.
Yes.
Your soul develops alongside that, and
Mm-hmm.
it's, yeah, like,
Mm-hmm.
the we need the money to survive, but we also need life to survive.
Oh
And
yeah.
so
Yeah.
there's so much
So important.
abundance in the business, but we have to
Mm-hmm.
choose to feel it and accept it, because society tells us it's a paper, it's a piece of paper. um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I love this. Thank you, Jamie. We have a few questions
Of
before
course.
I
Oh
say
yeah.
goodbye. And I'm so
Ah.
excited Dasha's watching, because Dasha, she is a vendor at Hester Street,
Oh,
and
cool.
she's kind of back and forth between New Jersey and Oklahoma. She's relocating to Oklahoma. Sorry, Dasha, I totally just blew up your spot. And she asked a question. She said, "This is kind of selfish, but do you recommend any markets in Oklahoma?" She's in Oklahoma City.
Oh, I've actually never been. Oh no. I wish that I had been to be
Okay,
able to suggest any. We No, we never drove through Oklahoma. We went more northern and then southern routes when we went out. So I didn't
got
get
it.
to, that was one of the states we didn't get to go to. But I would always just, I would suggest looking up vintage shops in that area to see if they post about any markets they're attending.
Ah,
Looking at geotags of the city, and looking up any kind of, like, how there's like timeout and stuff like that, like looking up anything like that, and I feel like you'd be able to find stuff pretty
That's
quick.
great advice. That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah,
And then
utilize those free resources.
I know, and just ask, right?
Yeah.
So she also asked, how long did it take for you to source your inventory before you started
Mm.
selling?
Mm. So I started off, I think it's pretty common. A lot of it was from my closet,
Yeah.
to begin with. Yep, that's pretty common thing. And then in between that, I just kind of would just thrift and thrift and thrift and find things. And for my first event, I think I remember because it was like I had 2 racks and like I could fit like 75 pieces, and that's how much I brought. And
Yeah.
then for the trailer, it was really traveling helped to bulk that up a lot for
Right.
inventory. So I don't think you can ever have too much or too little, especially if it's like if you do have a little, it's a good selection. It's representative of who you are, and you feel really proud of those pieces. I don't think there's ever too little, and there's obviously never too much. But I think it's good to just always be
Mhm.
looking.
This is awesome. And then she also, wait, we had one more question. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Sure.
And if anyone has any other questions for Jamie, I know we did a lot of nooks and crannies and just circles and lots of routes. I'm pulling out a lot of metaphors about the trailer, but
Yes.
routes and
Yeah, it's
journeys and
okay.
destinations in this conversation.
Yes.
How long were you selling in person, Jamie, before you launched online?
I launched online immediately. So
Wow.
I did them both at the same time.
Okay.
I think I'd had like maybe 5 or 6 things on Etsy, literally, just for people who are already following me online to be able to see. And then when we were on the road, hardly ever, hardly ever. Maybe I would do some, that was what time I would maybe post something on Instagram to sell. But when we stopped, like when we were in Denver, I posted more because we were stationary. And
Mm,
then when we came back to Connecticut after the first trip out, I would
right.
do that. But yeah, always had a presence. I think it's good. Once again, you don't have to have hundreds of pieces online. I think it's just like ones that are representative and like showcase who you are as a brand. It's just good to have it in this day and age.
Love it, love it. All right, well, I don't see any more questions, but I do see that a ton of
Okay.
people watched. We are so grateful,
Oh,
Jamie.
good.
Thank you
Yeah, thank you so
so
much.
much. And I hope
Of course, my
that
pleasure.
in 6 years I could interview you again. I mean, hopefully before that, like hopefully like
Yeah.
with a TV show, like
Yeah.
made
Oh,
for
yeah, there we
like
go.
Netflix, like,
Oh my God.
like I'm the host and I'm like, no, we
Yes.
gotta like go
Yes.
showcase toast.
There
But
you go.
another 6 years that you're still working in the business in a way that,
Thank you.
fuels your heart space, not fuels your heart space, but like meets your heart where it's at in life. So thank
Yeah, thank
you
you
for
so much.
everything that
Thank
you
you,
shared with us
Sammy.
tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Good night, everyone. Bye,
Bye. Good
coast to
night.
coast. Bye.
Bye.